I've learned from a long time ago about this place up here. And the fact is, there is nothing of any consequence that happens in Washington, D.C., unless the American people demand it. And how do you do that? And that's what I told my team. We were sitting around. How do we do this? We make sure that we keep this in the public. We make sure that we keep this in the media. We make sure that Laken Riley's name becomes the face of this problem. We do that, and we'll be able to get some legislation that'll impact and make a change there.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview. Congressman Mike Collins, welcome to the Signal Sitdown.
Hey, man, appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Though so far, Trump has only signed 5 pieces of legislation into law. We're waiting for that one big, beautiful bill. We're recording this on Wednesday, so a lot is happening on Capitol Hill today, and we appreciate you making the time. But one of the major pieces of legislation that Trump has signed thus far is the Laken Riley Act.
Right.
And you were the lead on that bill. Laken Riley is killed in February of 2024. Take us through how this
bill... She was heinously murdered by a thug criminal that not only came into our country illegally, but came into our country illegally to practice his trade. And that criminal activity that the Biden administration to continue just to allow, without any recourse or without any repercussions, and embolden him to the point where he went from endangering a child to shoplifting to murder.
So this happens in your backyard. This is your district at home.
Yeah, that's right.
So February 22nd, 2024, Laken Riley's murdered.
Yeah.
How do you become aware of what had happened to her, and how does this bill take shape?
Yeah, it's odd. I won't forget it. We were over in South Carolina going to a Trump rally, and one of my local law enforcement sheriff called and informed me that there was a murder. And I said, oh, God, don't tell me what you're going to tell me next. And he said, well, I can't confirm it, but I can assure you. And so, yeah, from that moment on, it was exactly tell me what happened, how this transpired. How do we have criminal activity, criminal illegal thugs that are in Athens, Georgia, a college town with 25,000+ students that parents are sending their kids there thinking that they're safe? Well, it comes to find out, just a side note, the mayor, who is still the mayor there, and that council were treating that city like a sanctuary city, even though we aren't allowed to it's illegal to have sanctuary cities in Georgia. But, from the point of where I found out and made a phone call to the family and told them that we were going to be on top of this, I think I just go into the same mode that I always have. I'm in the trucking industry. Unfortunately, sometimes things happen, and when they do, and it's like that in any business, I think, you identify what the problem is, what happened, what's the solution, and then how do we fix that problem so that it never happens again? And so if you look how we went through the Laken Riley Act and wrote it, it addresses all those things. And of course, getting it passed and signed into law was how do you make sure it doesn't happen again?
When did the president become aware of this legislation? Obviously, at the time, he's a candidate running for reelect. It became a major part of the president's crackdown on immigration platform.
Sure it did.
How did he become aware of it? Did you have any conversations with him about it before entering office?
Well, I did. As a matter of fact, he met the family while he was campaigning in Georgia on one occasion. But, I think that has a lot to do with how we process. I've learned from a long time ago about this place up here. And the fact is, there is nothing of any consequence that happens in Washington, D.C., unless the American people demand it. And how do you do that? And that's what I told my team. We were sitting around. How do we do this? We make sure that we keep this in the public. We make sure that we keep this in the media. We make sure that Laken Riley's name becomes the face of this problem. We do that, and we'll be able to get some legislation that'll impact and make a change there. And so we made sure that as things came up, or if we felt like we could push her name or push the Laken Riley Act again, we would get out there. And we had I give credit, news media, people like y'all, that you really helped us keep that out there and keep that face that the problem that we had. And sure, after a while, it just became a groundswell. I've heard her name as recently as earlier this week. It's still talked about. And so nothing actually happens up here until the American people demand it. They were demanding that.
Yeah, the American people were demanding it for sure. I mean, I think it was a marvel for all of us who've been in this game for a while, who remember Trump running in 2016, to see in 2024 that the public support for mass deportations hit 50%. I mean, it was just something that was unconscionable to immigration restrictionists like us in the Republican Party or conservatives writ large who were immigration
you take this family, for instance, now. They're just middle class, great family, salt of the earth. They love their girls. You could tell it. I mean, you could see it. And I think people related to that. I mean, this young lady, all she wanted to do was help people. She was going to be a nurse. She wanted to help take care of people for the rest of her life. And to have her life end the way that it did, so unnecessary. Mm-hmm. I think most people related to that. And they were like, whoa, wait a minute. I've got a child. I mean, my youngest daughter, or my only daughter, she's 28 now. So sure, she was off at college when she was at home. And so I think people saw that and said, you know what, we got to stop this. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it was basic, the biggest no-brainer piece of legislation of all time. You introduce it last Congress in the 118th.
We did.
It passes the House.
It did.
Republican control, no surprise whatsoever. Yeah. The first is, what was in that bill in particular? I'll let you talk about your own bill. And the second is, why didn't Democrats come around to supporting this last Congress?
Well, let's start there to begin with. The majority of Democrats are on board with this. This wasn't just to allow criminals into our country. This was introducing a new voter bloc for them to depend on. The American people are beginning to wake up, and they understand that the federal government's too big, it's too intrusive on every aspect of their life. So they need new people, new voters, and that's why they wouldn't step up. They don't care the consequence. They don't care about that. They have an agenda that they're on, and they were on. But this piece of legislation, in the 118th Congress, we picked up 18 Democrats, if I remember right. I can't remember some of these numbers, that went along with us. So it was a good bipartisan bill that got passed out of the House. And when it got to the Senate, it just fell into that big black hole over there, right, along with the 100+ other pieces of legislation.
Chuck Schumer's Mary Poppins bag or something.
Yeah, it just poof, it disappears. And, and I told the family when we talked after it went over there, and I was told there's no way it's coming up. And I told them it had gotten personal, I told them that I couldn't let it go. Not that I wouldn't. I just couldn't. That no matter what, we were going to get this passed if it's the last thing that I ever do. And because you think about how that young lady fought for her life. Mm-hmm. She fought to her last breath. And that's the least that we could do for her. Not to mention the countless other people that we don't have their names or they're not on the bill. But we pushed it back through in the 119th. It's really odd. And I don't know how far you want me to get into detail on this, but I was out traveling. Thank the good Lord, I didn't have a primary opposition. And I didn't even know who my Democrat opposition was till I went and voted.
That's calling running your race, right?
So it allowed us to get out across the country. And we had picked out 9 different candidates across the country that I personally spent my time and money and effort to go and campaign for. I mean, if you met the 4 criteria that I set up, then we would come to your district, not do a dog and pony show and a fundraiser. But I stayed there for 2 and 3 days, knocking on doors and telling people, hey, I'm so-and-so, and this person's running for Congress, and I need your help because I need them to get stuff passed. So we were out traveling, and I was with leadership. And this was in October. They had asked, Steve Scalise had asked me to go with him for a few days. And as we were talking, I said, Majority Leader, we have the opportunity now. We're going to win the White House. We're going to win the House. We're going to keep the House, and we're going to get the Senate. We need to make sure that Laken Riley gets passed pretty quick to give Tom Homan that extra ammunition. Because what this bill does is it allows local law enforcement to call in ICE on lesser crime. At that time, the only time they could call ICE is if something major happened, like murder. But shoplifting and petty theft, that type, it wasn't in the regs. So local law enforcement didn't call ICE. If they had this guy would have been picked up in New York City and hauled out of here. Or he would have been picked up in Athens the week before when he got picked up for shoplifting.
Right.
And so, we had a great discussion. I did not know that Scalise would put it number 1 on the docket. Fine with me. I thought it was great. But when you think back on it, how it happened, I think it's only fitting because you're right. President Trump, that was at the end of the campaign, everybody heard him. He would say, I used to think the economy was the number 1 issue, but it's not. It's the border. It's the border. And so to have that laying there waiting when he sat down at the Oval Office at the Resolute desk the first time, that was, I think it was special. And it was a symbol that, hey, we're taking this serious and we're fixing to stop this problem.
Yeah. I want to go back to the prediction that you made to Majority Leader Scalise in October. Well, fast forward to November, you're proven right.
Yeah.
Trifecta for Republicans.
Right.
President Trump makes a triumphant return in Washington, D.C. Unlike anything we've ever seen, even compared to Grover Cleveland, who comes back after a 4-year stint out of office. Talk to our viewers about how Democrats changed on this issue of immigration after they suffered that election loss in November. From my perspective, if it's not a trifecta, even if Democrats just keep the Senate or they just take the House, or obviously Kamala Harris is sitting atop the government in Washington, D.C. as president of the United States. Thank God that didn't happen. Yeah. This bill doesn't get done. It doesn't. You guys had to go 3 for 3, and it kind of had to be humiliating for them in a way. Yeah. And so take our listeners through how Democrats came around on this.
Well, and I'm old school in a lot of ways. I've always believed in you go and you visit your customer. And I've been a diamond medallion on Delta Airlines for decades because I go see who the people that I need to influence to get it the business. And so we knew we had 18 that signed on in the 118th. Mm-hmm. 7 of them weren't here anymore. And then so we decided we'd check with them first. 7
weren't here, but they're ours now.
Yeah, that's right.
So we miss you, but not that much.
Yeah, no big deal. But I got out and started going around door to door. A lot of times we'll get a text or an email or something like that. Hey, support me, or staff will come in. Hey, somebody wants you to look at this. But this was different in the fact it was that important, but it was also my business, the way I operate. So I just got out and started knocking on doors. As a matter of fact, one of the more moderate, I guess if you can call them that, Democrats, when I knocked on his door, it was probably about 7 o'clock at night. I didn't think he might be there, but might as well, it's there. And he said, man, I ain't seen nobody in my office in a decade. Nobody comes by. He said, talk to me. So we talked, and I told him, he said, you know what, not only will I support it, but if you need somebody to co-sponsor and it ain't too late, I'll jump on board. He understood what was about to happen to him. Mm-hmm. He knew that. And he had seen what had happened in November. And, but it was fine. It was good. I didn't mind that. And then once we got it out of the House with 30 plus Democrats signing on, I spent more time the next week on the Senate floor than I did on the House floor. That's your customer.
Right.
You know, you move from trying to move from the House being a customer to your senators. And so we stayed over there whipping that bill.
Was there a difference in the conversation that you have between House Democrats and Democrats in the Senate?
Yes.
Because they seem like
they're in no hurry.
The distinction is is easy to see on the Republican side. I think it's very obvious on the Democratic side, where you don't, aside from our good friend Bernie Sanders, you don't have any real progressive, hard-hitting Senate Democrats. They're kind of all Amy Klobuchar types, you know.
Yeah, but they're pretty shrewd, though. Now.
Yeah, they are shrewd.
You take
this is not underestimating their political calculations.
Yeah.
But like even someone who has some good progressive bona fides, like Cory Booker, is nowhere close to Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, the radicalism that has infected
and
those
no
two
need,
special members.
No need to even stopping in on them.
Yeah.
But you take the two senators from Georgia. Now, when I went and visited with both of them in the 118th Congress about this bill, one of them, who's up for re-election this next go-around, told me he was going to dismantle the whole bill, make it his bill, and then introduce one. And that ought to tell you where people stood right then. It wasn't about the policy. It was about the politics, because he had to get it. He's up for re-election, and he knows he's in trouble. I mean, he's Jewish, and he voted against Israel twice. You know, not to mention men and boy and women's sports, and you can go on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, both of our U.S. senators in Georgia were holdouts. One of them up until the last day, Warnock. And you know, it's so weird how things, just how things played out and how they work, and probably not in my entire career up here. It was on a Wednesday night. I was about to go to bed. It was like 10:30 at night. And my phone kept texting, and then people were calling. And it was the 10th district, started out being the 10th district, but it wound up, after a while, it was across the state. Preachers, what do we do? What do we need to do? How can we help? And I told them, man, you first thing in the morning, light the phones up.
Yeah.
Call Warnock and Ossoff and say, you better be on board. This happened in our state. The least you can do is vote yes on this. And that helped sway that. But we spent a lot of time over there just talking, because you're right. You know, when you take a senator, he's not up for re-election. Warnock's not up for 4 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time, and people forget about a lot of stuff in that time frame. And they weigh that. They think about that. That's why I'm so sick of people up here that play the politics of the game instead of policy. You know, that's what we're dealing with today. It should be policy, but...
Yeah, we're going to jump right into budget reconciliation in a second, but I have a few more questions to wrap this whole thing up.
Yeah.
When someone tells you point blank, they're going to dismantle this and make it their own. What Ossoff's telling you is, I'm going to make this bill a messaging bill only. Yeah. There's going to be no teeth in this bill, right? Yeah. Actually doing something effective in Laken Riley's name isn't what he's trying to do.
Or solve the problem.
Right. So how do those dismantling efforts, undermining efforts work? And for the people back home who sit and read headlines in Washington, D.C., and, you know, let's say he actually went through with being able to dismantle that bill. Well, nevertheless, some outlet like the New York Times or Politico or something like that is going to run a headline saying, you know, Ossoff has new Laken Riley Act that does all these good things. That's going to be the headline.
Bigger, more improved.
Bigger, more, exactly. 2.0 is going to be better than anything that Mr. Collins put forward. Yeah. So take us through how these people appropriate ideas, undermine the good stuff, and just turn things into silly little messaging bills to maintain the status quo.
And you know what? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Now, it happens in the House a lot too now. And at one point, I had people on my side that were claiming that Laken Riley was a messaging bill. And I laid the law down real quick. First of all, I don't do messaging bills. I don't have time for that. I came up here with a specific list of goals that I want to see accomplished. When I get through with those goals, I'll go home. If I want a message, I'll do that from the house. I don't have to do that up here because you're not actually trying to accomplish anything. A lot of times, and in his case, and what they're trying to do is prevent someone else from getting good legislation through. And so, yeah, you see people all the time you see a lot of people writing letters and stuff, we're going to write a strongly worded letter.
I always get pitches to write up those letters.
Yeah.
Hey, Bradley, we've got this letter that we're sending to Shalonda Young at the OMB if we're talking about the previous administration. Okay, great. I'll write that up. Never, ever get a pitch about the Biden administration's response to that letter. Very rarely I do, right?
Yeah. And take, for instance, I know this is way off subject, but I'm chairman of the Water Resource and Environment Subcommittee on Transportation Infrastructure. The entire Army Corps of Engineers on the Civil Works Division is under me. Mm-hmm. I have control of all the ports, canals, locks, federal waterways, navigational. It goes right through that little subcommittee. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers is the most unproductive, inefficient group I have ever seen in my life. I could have just wrote them a letter. But you know what? We've been out traveling around the country. We've been going to every one of these districts, these problem childs, and we've been saying, what the heck's going on here? And we came here to fix the problem. And I'll tell you how effective it's been. The Port of Brunswick in Georgia, and I started in my own backyard. Dog, it won't bark in his own backyard. Go get you another dog. So we started with Brunswick. The port down there that had the ship that was laid over on the side for a few years because it ran aground. That harbor had not been fully dredged since 2010. That is the number one roll-on, roll-off port in the country. We went down there to find out what's going on. We addressed the problem. We think we've got a good fix for the problem to solve it forever. But last week, they got $35 million all of a sudden to dredge that thing. And they only had a 90-day window. Well, now they feel like they've got the whole year that they can do it. That tells you the difference in somebody that just wants to put out a messaging bill, write a letter, whatever, say, hey, we're going to do it. And a lot of times these messaging type bills, you'll drop it. Hey, let's go ahead and drop it in the hopper. It'll get assigned to a committee, and you'll never see it again.
Yeah.
And they'll never talk about it again. But hey, man, put the press release out. Well, this is what we're doing. We're all in, but then they don't follow up. And I think that's another reason people ask me, Mike, I probably have my name. I am the lowest ranking, especially in Georgia delegation, as far as people that put their names as co-sponsor on the bill. I put my name as a co-sponsor. I'm going to push it. I expect it to pass. I'm not just going to come up here to put my name on everything and then just drop it and go to a committee and live a different life.
Mike Collins has been a co-sponsor on 105 bills that have passed. Well, little did you know he was co-sponsoring 15,000 bills at the time.
Yeah. So we really pick and choose what we get involved with. We don't write letters. We go, I even told the Army Corps, where's your office at? I'm coming over. Oh, you can't do that, sir. The heck I can't. You're just down the street, I'm sure.
Trying to help you.
Yeah. So, but we've got to.
I'm not going to rate it like an ICE facility, like Representative MacGyver.
We're just coming down to go over, and try to address the problems. And I think a lot of times people use that as a messaging tool too, and they don't really want to address the problem. They just want a press release or a press conference or to be on TV for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we have to skip over this briefly, but when those Democrats got arrested at that ICE facility, and then someone, like a podium, popped out of nowhere. It was just like, oof, all of a sudden, they had a podium. And I couldn't help but think of the like, it wasn't the QAnon shaman, but the January 6ther who's walking around with the podium. Like, there's a Democrat somewhere outside of an ICE facility walking around carrying this podium wherever they go. Anyway, so Laken Riley, it ends up on the president's desk.
Yeah.
Big victory for you, for the Republicans in Congress, for the American people, obviously for Laken Riley's family.
And I'll tell you, not to interrupt you, but I'll tell you a little thing that most people didn't notice.
Mm-hmm.
Laken's family rode over. We all rode over together, and we were walking up, and she said, "Mike, I get pretty emotional." I said, "Yeah, me too, man. I do." And I said, "But when I do, I try to stop and I just take in a deep breath. And when I do that, I can continue talking." She said, "Okay, okay." So she's up there, and I don't know if y'all noticed it, but she started to crack up. It was getting emotional, and she's paused, and I could see out of the corner of my eye President Trump. Now, most people in his stature, they're looking around, and just, see who's looking at me in pictures. He gently reached up there, I don't know if you noticed it, and put his hand on her shoulder, just touched her, and boom, calmed her down. And I tell that story because it tells you what kind of person that he is. He's compassion. He's not all about Trump and, take pictures and all that. It just showed the human side of somebody that really was to what she was saying and cared about what she was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone says Trump, he's such a megalomaniac. He's such an egomaniac.
Yeah.
I don't know someone who's so obsessed with their ego that has taken more slings and arrows than the president.
Yeah.
If that was the case, he'd be doing things a lot differently. He wouldn't be pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
He'd be, of course, as the president of the United States, you're concerned with what your public image is, and you get mad when the press is lying about you for decades at this point. But he would be doing things a lot differently if he was actually concerned with maintaining his ego.
Right. And I don't know how many people
he does it way differently
in his stature would actually be listening. Most of the time you're thinking about what's the next speech. What do I got to say next? What do I got to? But yeah, when he just reached up and just gently touched her, it was just like calm. Mm-hmm. And she went on and finished her speech.
Yeah. And now we have to turn to budget reconciliation.
Lord help.
Lord help us. This is the big, beautiful bill that's going to get a lot of the MAGA agenda through.
Yeah.
Though the Laken Riley Act was a good start, there's a lot of things to do on the border. Of course, there's the continued conversations about Medicaid, SALT, etc. And it hasn't even gotten the Senate's hands yet. But you guys are looking to get this thing done, passed on the House floor by the time you hit Memorial Day recess.
Amen, brother.
We are recording this on Wednesday morning. This is going to release Thursday morning. Frankly, Mike, who the hell knows what's going to happen over the next 24 hours? So we're going to try to talk in some hypotheticals here.
I tell you what should happen.
Mm-hmm.
We should stay here until this gets done.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of these short weeks. It's killing me. I can't stand it.
Yeah, because you get out of here on Friday, and then you got the week off.
Yeah.
But
we should stay.
Stay Amen. Until it's done.
Yeah.
Just keep pushing the envelope. So I assume you were there at the meeting yesterday. President Trump comes down there.
Yeah.
Talked to Leader Scalise about this a little bit yesterday. He said Trump provided a pretty powerful message while in there. I mean, take us inside that room.
Yeah, no,
President Trump is on Capitol Hill. What is he telling House Republicans?
What I read was, and what I got was, listen, this is what I campaigned on. Now, he didn't go into details. He didn't have to. But this is what I've campaigned on, y'all. You've got it put together. The longer that you sit here and wait, the worse the economy is going to continue to slide. It's sliding. I know everybody's, and they try to put on a good face, but I'm in trucking. Brother, we're first in, first out. We see what's being moved. And everybody in this economy's got the brakes on right now. They're waiting to see what's going to happen with this tax policy. Now, if we continue to push this back, trying to please everybody in every little facet of this conference, we're going to wind up with an economy that's going to be slower to recover, and it's going to take a lot longer, and you are going to pay dearly in the midterms for that. And then what's going to happen is you're going to spend 2 years like you did the last 2 years of President Trump's first administration of impeachment and investigation and criminal charges over who knows what. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Never going to get perfect. But the main thing that's in there are those tax cuts. And as somebody, I started my business career at the age of 23 under H.W. Bush. So I've seen them all. I've been through every administration, including Biden. Our sons now run that operation. And I can tell you unequivocally, without a doubt, not a hesitation, the best administration that I made more money and paid more taxes under, though, was Trump administration. Those tax cuts, those tax policies work. They benefit small businesses. They benefit everybody. And we need to make sure that those get implemented. You don't have, this is a once in a generational time in history. And we have the opportunity right now to change this country for generations. And some of the things that SALT, for instance, while we're debating this, while we're talking, I do not know. Why that's a blue state, New York or California, whichever one you want to look at.
Right. This is the funny thing for me when I hear people talk about the SALT deduction. I'm from California. I understand that it's an existential issue for some of these members of Congress. The movement did not elect Donald Trump to provide a tax cut via SALT for liberals, wealthy liberals in California and New York. That's not why they're there. And frankly, what's going to look worse on you? Holding up the president's agenda, which includes unleashing American energy.
Oh, yeah, securing
the border, making sure that the American people don't get a large tax hike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a bigger threat to your reelection, or is the state and local tax deduction a bigger threat to your reelection?
Without a doubt. We all know that it's not passing this.
I'm from Southern California. The Republican base there's this misconception that everybody in Southern California must be a squish Republican. No. The people on the grassroots level in California are rabid right-wingers because they see the effects of mass immigration every single day. Yeah. There's nobody who's bigger restrictionist than the people that I know back home who make up the Republican grassroots in Southern California. And so if these folks hold this hostage over the SALT provisions, it's not going to be they lost people in the middle and aren't going to be returning to Washington. It's they lost members of their own base on the immigration issue because they held up deportations, right? Well, this is border. And
I think that Trump put it pretty clear. He said, if you lose your reelection, it's not going to be over SALT.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be because you're killing this. And that's way more important. Mm-hmm. The SALT, if they want to fix SALT, do it at the state level because that's where the problem's at. And the funny little thing on the side is there are so many loopholes to SALT that a lot of accountants say, why are you even fooling with it? They already have enough loopholes to get out of it and to get it paid through the corporation so that it doesn't pass through to the owner. So it's kind of a moot point, but it's I guess a trigger for them to say that this is so important that we're going to hold it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from what I've heard, he came in there and said the time for negotiating is over. Right, this is the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal. This is probably the most famous businessman in the United States since Rockefeller, coming in telling House Republicans, "You guys had your time to do all this stuff. It's been months, but no more."
Yeah.
He told members of the conservative conference, I think Chip Roy makes very good arguments about what we need to do with Medicaid in the long run and changing FMAP, et cetera, et cetera. We shouldn't be, it's just like SALT. We shouldn't be incentivizing states to have these terribly run state healthcare programs. But his message to them was don't bleep with Medicaid.
Yeah.
And his message to the SALT conference was take the deal.
Yeah.
It's a better deal than you would have got otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
You're moving the cap up from 10 to 40K. You don't fix the marriage problem or the marriage penalty or whatever they call it, but you're getting, $500,000 or less at a cap of $40,000. That seems pretty darn good to me if I'm a SALT conference member.
And the thing is, we'll have another option to do another budget reconciliation. We should have time to do another one. And but what you really need to do is make sure that you stabilize the business community, because even you talk about Medicaid, people on Medicaid, they don't want to be on Medicaid. You know what? I remember during the first Trump administration, you saw people that were actually proud that they were providing for their families. They were getting out there. They were seeing what success actually looked like and what winning felt like, because they were buying cars, actually moving into houses and going on vacation. I saw it every week when I came. As a matter of fact, I used to joke that it looked like we were a car dealership. No particular brand, but the drivers that parked their vehicles at our office, man, new cars everywhere. And so it was you get this economy stabilized. You secure that border. You solidify our place at the top. Lord help, I have been America first all my entire life. I believe that we are in the best country in the world. And we need to project that around the world. There's no problem being the big boy on the block.
Mm-hmm. The majority leader yesterday created some pretty apocalyptic stakes for the passage of this thing. He said, you didn't come up here to not vote and let America crash and burn.
Yeah.
He said, if we don't pass this thing, America's going to end up in a death spiral. Here we are. We're about to vote.
Yeah.
Do you share the majority leader's sense? It's that the stakes are that high?
The stakes are that high because you're talking about $4.7 trillion that's going to be pulled out of the economy due to tax increases.
Mm-hmm.
Even whether you agree with child tax care credit or not, it's fixing to be cut in half. That's in this. That expires.
Yeah.
So we're fixing to pull $4.7 trillion out of the economy. You don't think that's not going to have a big devastating effect? You already have people sitting on the sidelines that will not spend money.
Because they're worried about the tax conversation that comes next April, right?
Well, they're worried about the economy, period.
Mm-hmm.
What if we do invest, and the tax cuts go expire? What's going to happen? This economy is going to go down, and recovery is going to be tough. And you've already seen what happens when the federal government just passes out money left and right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's got us into the inflationary problem that we've got now.
Yeah, I've got two more questions for
Yes.
you. I know that we're tight on time here because you guys got to get across the street and actually go about that business.
Yeah, man.
The first is, if the vote does fail, where do Republicans go from here? Because the margin is so narrow. And you probably won't get someone like Thomas Massey, and if you don't get a few others, well, then where does this process restart?
You let the 800-pound gorilla weigh in, and you vote again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something. When the coach calls
that 800-pound gorilla being the man who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania
that's exactly
Avenue.
right, and he's the coach. And when the coach calls the play, the one that got the mandate from America, you run the play. Now, if you don't want to run the play, that's fine, because we're gonna have halftime coming up soon next year. We'll get new players. But this thing has got to pass. And hey, there's some things, hey, I'd love to get rid of entire federal agencies right off the bat. I can name some. But right now, we have got to get those tax cuts permanent. We have got to, businesses cannot operate on assumptions or just something that's going to expire in a few years. And a lot of people don't understand it. I understand that. They're not in the business world. That's okay. I think we need more business people up here. But if you cannot take your business on a 5-year, 7-year business plan, then you're not setting yourself up for success. And you can't do that. You're not allowed to successfully do that when you don't have these tax policies that are permanent. And they've been inching their way down. Accelerated depreciation, for instance. It was 100%, and 80%, and 60%. Now it's expiring. And for people like me that you trade your trucks based on a depreciation cycle. Right. And you have to keep doing that. Otherwise, you're going to get caught up in paying a tax penalty, which is what we've had the last few years. But, and I know that's deep in the weeds, but I'm just saying that is the first part of this. And inside that reconciliation is also a lot of those executive orders that President Trump's been signing. And we have the opportunity to go ahead and codify those without having to wait on 60 senators to help us do it.
Mm-hmm. You are probably the person who speaks the most common sense in Congress at this point about the immigration issue. You've got a piece of legislation called Security and Fairness Enhancement Act, the Security and Fairness Enhancement Act. it's going to end this diversity visa
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, tell our viewers back
Yeah.
at home what this system is
fewer than-
and why it needs to come to an end. Because this has been, for the people who are the immigration restrictionists, this is probably the visa program that is the stupidest of all of them.
Oh, I would agree with you. So if you're going to have a visa program and you're going to have immigration, you want people to come into your country that are going to make a difference to help you. Be like you having somebody come in to help you in your business. You're not just looking for charity. And that's essentially what this is. This is unknown charity. I mean, a country with less than 5,000, I think is what it was, that immigrate on an annual basis, then you can pay $100 to join a lottery, and then you could potentially come to the United States with no strings attached, and you don't know who you're getting, and especially with these countries that we really don't know a lot about them anyway, and they certainly aren't coming here to help push the American perspective. Or they may be, who knows? You can't say all of them. But you're right, it's one of the dumbest things that we've heard of. And it's something that just needs to go. It's not that hard to get rid of this.
Yeah. Giving away access to the American Republic
to the
via
country.
lottery system is like the most absurd immigration policy ever.
Yeah.
It actually makes more sense to bring in what Emma Lazarus says on the Statue of Liberty, which Democrats think is the actual law of the land. It actually makes more sense to bring in the poor and the huddled masses out of some sense of justice and charity. It makes zero sense at all to do it just by spinning the wheel and seeing what comes up.
Yeah, reaching in. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Abdul and Jonathan. Where are we going? Yeah, exactly.
We'll fly you on in here. Then you can do what get on every welfare, get on everything we've got, and see what you can do.
Right, because
from now on, brother, it ought to be, if you're coming here, you're going to help us succeed. You're going to assimilate to the American way of life. You're going to speak English. You're going to be able to read English. We've got truck drivers out there that can't speak or read English. Think about that.
Makes it difficult to know where you're going.
Hey, that's the reason that the accident rate on commercial vehicles went up 75% over year, because you have people that can't read the dad blame signs. And you know what's going to happen to them? Nothing. They'll go back home.
Yeah.
They'll slip right back out of the country.
But someone's left holding that bag, right?
But that's the same thing with the visa. What sense does that make? And where does that help us advance as Americans?
Yeah, Howard Lutnick needs to get those gold cards set up. I want to see how just to see how many we sell. Right?
I guarantee.
I think we'd sell a lot.
You're not joking, and they know that.
Yeah,
there are people that want to come here to live the American dream and help push the American way of life. There are, but this isn't the way you do it with that.
And if they're caught doing minor crimes, they're gonna get a one-way ticket back home before they commit major crimes.
That's it.
Congressman Mike Collins, thank you for coming on the Signal Sitdown.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.